Welcome again to Disruption Drive, your go-to spot for reimagining the future of mobility. I have, again, a very special guest today, our first venture capitalist on the show, but that's just one of the very many hats he has worn. Mark Norman has done it all. He's been a founder, CEO, operator at just about every corner of the automotive world. He led Daimler Chrysler in Canada, ran Zipcar and Flexcar, both early pioneer of rideshare, and now heads up FM Capital, where he invests in the rapid commercialization stages across the entire automotive ecosystem. It was honestly hard to pick a single topic for this chat because Mark can dive deep on pretty much so many areas. But we landed on one that is especially exciting right now, the huge commercialization opportunities happening freight and logistics. Mark, thank you for coming on the show, and I know you have a busy Monday, so thank you especially. But I wanted to provide some context. I know you sit on the boards of several, of course, automotive, autonomous vehicle, companies, OEMs, including Gatik and Outrider. But I wanted to sort of ask you a broader question across companies and industries. Tell us how you see the adoption curves contrasting between passenger, robotaxis, as we call them, or robovans, and freight and logistics. Do you inherently think that freight fundamentally is getting underserved across, including the media, but even in the investor community?
All right. First, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be on your podcast today. A couple things to think about as you think about just scaling new technology, new startups, and what's the role and the difference for both ride hailing and more consumer facing applications and things that are more commercial facing. First one, just to point out, is on, frankly, the cost of the driver. I have a family member who drives for Uber Eats, and she can tell you what she makes for delivering food. And I have other drivers for more commercial driven businesses on which I'm on the board. And those drivers are skilled, drive at different shifts, and command a different wage premium and different service level needs all the way up through the ecosystem on how you think about uptime for the vehicles they drive as well. So that's one, is driver skill, driver wage. A second one is volume, right? When you think about a user operated rideshare fleet, sometimes they're small fleets like they might be in Turo, where I was on the board a few years ago. Some that are managing micro fleets, 5 cars, 20 cars. Contrast that with a large company like a large delivery provider who might manage 100,000 assets. And so the scale economies matter very quickly with that group. And then thirdly, utilization, time of day matters a ton. I think about our time at Zipcar and managing utilization, trying to get wheels when you want them for folks when they needed them, whether it was a religious holiday, a personal event, a wedding, a trip to the IKEA, the doctor, how to manage all of that demand patterns during a 24-hour clock. There's a lot of talk about how vehicles sit idle 95% of the day, yet at certain times of the week, many of them are on the road. So how do you think about that as you think about different use cases? So great kickoff for the discussion. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mark. So, you mentioned driver cost or earnings, volume, and then the fundamental aspect of utilization. So, again, getting to comparing freight, which is of course a commercial activity, and then the passenger, which could be commercial or direct to consumer. Talk to us about how you've followed this industry for decades at this point. You've been here, you've been in various different roles, of course, but now as an investor. How do you contrast these adoption curves? Because we've even from the product and the technology part of it, as well as the actual consumer demand and change part of it. What do you think is happening?
Yeah. So when you think about willingness to make changes, to transform different parts of that whole supply chain, you really think about reliability and service levels. What happens? What are my complements and substitutes? What are the alternatives if this solution doesn't work? We think about what a game changer ride hailing has been versus taxi hailing. We think about how that can provide a fractional vehicle usage. You also look at the explosion of e-commerce
Yeah.
over the last decades, and particularly over the last 5 years even. And what are those expectations? Who would have thought we would have Amazon now,
Yeah.
right? Which is how do I think about orders and deliveries within hours versus days? What are those requirements? What expectations and challenges does that open up through the whole fleet ecosystem? What does that mean? If you're a FedEx, if you're a Penske, which customers do you have that need it now versus overnight versus in a week or two? And how do you think about willingness to pay for those service levels?
Do you think that there is or do you even think it's maybe lack of, maybe it's, do you think that there's a difference in the willingness to pay for a commercial active, let's say freight and goods, versus a person needing to go somewhere? And what are the magnitudes of difference in this?
On average, absolutely. Specifically, you might have a certain use case where it's a baby on the way, and it's like I can drive my in this case, wife to the hospital, and what am I willing to pay, or what's it gonna? I mean, do whatever it takes and have the baby along the way if I have to, type of thing. So now, on average, I think most people think of what's the cost of their time. Uh, you look at the cost of using a car and that sort of calculus. What's the hassle? What's the predictability? What's the traffic? Now add how many other demands can ride in that same trip, right? So now we're into an Uber Eats or an Uber Pool type of a use case. Who's willing to share the ride? Now it's gotten to be maybe double what an individual would pay. Now a commercial driver. Now think about what's the service level if a commercial truck goes down that's carrying frozen goods. What's the value of that
Yeah.
mobile service for that truck? It's high. And so you think about these sort of on-demand, I think of the business school case of, where would you put the early, long life light bulbs? You'd start in the operating room, right? Where do you not want them to go out? And how do some of those economics and use cases play in mobility and transportation?
You're making an important point about really look, a willingness to pay is based on, well, what value is created. And in the commercialization in the freight area, that is actually fairly clear. You've refrigerated goods or frozen goods, even more so. There is a spoilage element that you could technically, value against. And in the passenger transport, it's about time. It's about value for time. If you're delivering a baby, well, you better get there very quickly. Going for a joyride, maybe you could be a bit more flexible. But let me sort of dive deep into one of this and say, look, you invest in both these spaces, of course, and how do the lessons translate? We're seeing the AV industry, autonomous vehicles, of course, in a fairly uh, early stage of commercialization. How do lessons translate from one to the other? Across both, we have seen companies launching one first and then the other, tell us a little bit about how do you think. Like, are these different use cases that need to be operated differently, or is there a scale element there that it actually needs a fleet, for example, to operate as one? Uber,
Yeah,
for example.
no, great question. Thank you. Some of the lessons that we've learned are replacing a professional driver usually leads to a willingness to pay for the stack and the solution. And I mean a sensor suite, a vehicle, and the software to operate it that's slightly higher. So again, think of that Uber use case, and from some of the public filings of labor laws in California for Uber and Lyft, and are they 1099 or W-2? That those drivers tend to make on average something in the neighborhood of $17 an hour. Varies by state, varies by city, and so on. And you also know, as a user, the pricing varies a lot on the trip. If
Yeah.
I'm going for a couple miles in Manhattan during rush hour, I'm going to pay quite a bit per mile, 10, $20, sometimes more, right? Something longer in a more rural, less peak time driven, it's going to be something a bit less, one or even as little as a couple bucks per mile. So the lessons then have been, when we can replace a professional driver, importantly, that's also hard to hire. And again, not naming any customers in particular, but I remember doing diligence for one of our companies and said, what's the pain point to this large Fortune 200 type of customer of hiring drivers in this space?
Yeah.
That particular space was autonomous yard trucks. What are yard trucks? They move trucks around a distribution yard, their trailers, to make sure cargo is moving where it needs to be, and that next tractor pickup for that next leg is smooth and efficient. How hard is it to hire in that example? I said, low, medium, or high. Customer said, what's the level above high? And so now it's not just a cost, willing to pay a professional wage versus just a ride hail, anybody, a gypsy cab wage of somebody just coming down the street, professional wage, and I can't staff the work. Now you've got the utilization question coming in too. Think about if you're an e-commerce goods or a grocery fulfillment, it's a bakery or even a soft drink distributor, and you say, I need to fill fresh in the morning. Well, what's your best delivery time in that graveyard shift, right? It might be in the midnight to 6 a.m. Well, good news is traffic's kind of low then. Bad news is people don't want to work then.
Right.
Now I've got more need, more pain point, more demand for complements and substitutes to human drivers. What else is out there? Does it work? Is it reliable? And that's led to some other things that we learned, but I want to stop.
Tell us about some of the other things you've learned to the extent you're open to sharing, because that's really the point of educating the audience here. But yeah.
Yeah, so you're hearing the theme is really more about automation than autonomy per se. And you say, well, that's just semantics. Yes. What are we automating that's hard to staff for, hard to hire for, something I'll pay a bit for, professional wage I can't fill? And now the question is also, what else is he or she doing as a driver? So I've automated driving. What else were they doing? Inspecting, hand truck delivery, ringing a doorbell, taking a photo of a package. Not all the same things can be automated by the same tool, and those have been powerful learnings on adoption and which use cases come first.
I do want to sharpen the pencil on that one, because you're talking about the human in the loop. There is, of course, you said automation rather than autonomy, and that's fair, right? But then what does that look like? Are we looking to look? You mentioned a driver's role. That is a lot more than just driving a car, sitting on a chair all day, technically driving a car. Are we looking to change that driver's role to be more of a facilitator of maybe loading and unloading, ringing a doorbell, maybe maintenance? Because there is still a huge shortage. I think there was a research done at Automotive Dealers Association, and they said it costs dealers, and this is a very specific use case, about $700,000 per unfilled vacancy per year. That's only per bay. That's per one person. That's a lot of money for any dealership. But what does that human in the loop now look like for freight and logistics?
I think it really depends on the use case, right? 2025 is an exciting, it's a year of commercialization for a number of autonomous and automated use cases. You see Waymo and a couple other players rolling out with more sizable fleets, lower wait times, lower cost in some key markets. Phoenix, San Francisco, LA, even maybe some mixed weather. I say mixed. I mean poor weather markets like New York is on the roadmap for Waymo, as well as some Sunbelt markets, Miami, Atlanta, et cetera. Aurora starting to scale with long haul trucking. Full disclosure, we're invested in a company, Gatik, that's middle mile trucking. There's been some talk about last mile and delivery. So the point across these different use cases is, what's the other tasks to driving tasks ratio to the human in the loop? Last mile is usually a little higher mix of other things than pure driving. Long haul, heavy mix of driving. You've got other things, ELD, labor restrictions on shift length and duration and things. And so you've got multi-shift operations that the driver can seamlessly, or the automated driver, the Aurora driver in this case, can power through and manage multiple shifts without timing out like a pilot. Um, Middle mile, same thing. Warehouse to warehouse, dock to dock, where there's more humans in the loop doing other things, say at the dock with lift trucks and other things. So the answer to the question is, I think adoption is coming with those higher mix of driving to other tasks. And then the role of the human is in other things that are harder to be automated. There's a lot of attention now, recently, on humanoid robots.
Yeah.
What other things can a human do that are slightly more specialized? Can they pack a truck? Can they pick pack an assembly line? I've seen all kinds of things. Can they, pour your coffee with really cool designs in it? I don't know if that's a really high need, but it's more available now with technology. So then the question becomes, what is the role for humans in logistics and in other parts of the economy, which is evolving, but it's not that different from what was going on with switchboard operators and some of that shift
Right.
decades.
Right. So let me ask you a broader question about the technological disruptions going on over on logistics. We've been spent a little bit of time talking about the fleet itself, but talk to me a little bit about the software part of it, or the other parts of it, maintenance, fueling, truck,
Uh,
tracking, and secular trends that are informing the change across the industry. And you've made several investments in this, but what really excites you?
yeah, and this is where our holistic focus on transportation and logistics gets us excited because we can see use of AI across different steps of just bringing a vehicle and moving people and goods. So what does that mean? We have an investment in a company called Viaduct that's using generative AI to pick up downtime causal factors or quality breakdown
Yeah.
factors that might trigger a recall much faster. Think of a campaign or a health issue that might need a 10,000 observed cases to notice something in the general population that's a health risk. Using generative AI, can you pick that up with 100 cases? What's the impact then on a fleet to say, this part wears out in this use case temperature with grade in the mountains. And so you have to replace this faster, and we're getting real-time data from the truck. So think
Yeah.
of health systems 3.0 that aren't just actuarial tables on how to eat right and live right. They're based on my metabolism, my genealogy, my diet, and can adjust that recommendation for me or for a VIN specific vehicle. That's exciting because now you're really using, again, personalized or VIN specific data to
Right.
drive longevity and efficient maintenance cycles. We get excited about that. We get excited about pricing optimization on the retail side of things, about software to help dealerships run better, to use AI to do load management for a logistics company. So there's less when a driver or a load gets canceled or sick, there isn't a bunch of manual labor to reshuffle and rejigger the planes. It's automatically done and it's on that next load and can drive more yield, more new routes that weren't even
Right.
visualized to be profitable because we didn't know with AI what the different permutations and opportunities could be.
Absolutely. But let me deep dive on one of the topics you mentioned, because VIN specific maintenance, even there's fundamentally a thesis in the both electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles that maintenance is going to be less required. All right. There's of course a contrarian thesis that is that they're actually more expensive. Which part? I mean, and where do you fall on that? Is maintenance, well, you could do it using AI, of course, at a very, very granular level, but that's doing the diagnostics of it. But what about the repair, the aftermarkets, getting it back on the road, reducing, increasing uptime?
Yeah, I think the debate is there's a certain group that may be saying, well, been there, done that. There's something in fleet management called, PM, preventative maintenance. And they say, well, the PM schedule's good. Again, think of that as actuaries with your health life expectancy. Hey, there's more data, it gets better. But again, what about my data, my health,
Yeah.
what I'm doing for or against my own longevity? So back to a car. Think our zip car example. We used to have a card reader in a car that had a little bit of battery draw. What does that do? That runs out the life of a battery a little bit faster. There's an OEM that was known for weaker batteries. They'll remain nameless for purposes of this discussion, but it was one of the top 5 or 6 OEMs. Lots of them were in the fleet. Now add cold weather. We had cars in Chicago and Toronto. So you could say, go and replace all the batteries instead of every 4 or 5 years, every 3 years, and you would be wasting 20, 30, 40% of that battery expense and all the shoe leather costs to visit the cars when the car can tell you, I am getting down to 15% effectiveness. Now's the time. I, as an individual VIN from this manufacturer, can kind of raise my hand and say, replace me,
Right.
not all of us. That's an example.
That's a great point. And you mentioned shoe leather cost, which I'm going to actually use more. It explains the cost of actually a person needing to go to a car and fix them. Actually, costs at Zipcar as well. We needed to have 2 people to do each of those things because that person needed a car to come back.
And that's where the fleet pros get cynical, rightly so, on predictive maintenance to say, if I take it out of service at the wrong time, if I don't batch it well, it's not convenient for the customer. And they're right. But if they can use that data and put those parameters in and say, how does my user
Right.
use it? When am I near a depot that's got service? When all that can go into the AI to say, now's the right time.
Yeah.
We can avoid the cost of downtime and avoid spending money unnecessarily by replacing too quickly.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Mark. And I wanted to that's all we have time for today, of course. But Mark, I wanted to maybe end with a very specific quote on logistics. I think it was Omar Bradley, who I think in leading World War II, said that the glamorous plans and the strategies really mean nothing if the unglamorous, effective supply chain of a movement of logistics, can be worked out. In fact, he said, I think amateurs talk strategy, experts talk logistics. So, hope again, everyone, Mark Norman is one of the experts in the world of vehicles, automotives in general, but today on logistics. We hope you had fun. You can find us all on YouTube and as of last week on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. But I wanted to take this time to thank Mark Norman for his time today and a wonderful discussion that I enjoyed and I hope you all enjoyed as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to be with you.